My wife thought she was the one setting the trap. She had no idea she was walking into mine. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the full picture. My name is Dave Bing. I'm 44 years old. I managed 3 branches of a building supply company across western North Carolina, and until last August. I would have told you my marriage was solid. Not perfect. Nobody's is, but solid. Olivia and I had been together 12 years, married for 9. We bought a craftsman bungalow in the Montford neighborhood of Asheville back when the market still made sense, and we'd spent a decade turning it into a home. Friday nights were takeout and bad reality TV. Sunday mornings were her doing the crossword while I made too much coffee. It was ours. It worked. I want you to remember that I'm not a suspicious man by nature. I'm the guy who gives people the benefit of the doubt past the point where I probably should. Keep that in mind, because it matters later. The shift started so small, I almost missed it. Late August, a Sunday evening. Olivia's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs. Normal, except when she came down. She didn't just glance at it. She snatched it up like I'd been about to read her diary. I laughed it off. "Somebody owe you money?" I asked. "Work stuff." She was already typing. "Don't worry about it." I didn't. Not that night. But over the next 2 weeks. The phone thing became a pattern. She started carrying it into the bathroom, into the garage when she needed air. She put a passcode on it for the first time in 9 years of marriage. A phone that used to sit face up on the coffee table all day, every day, for anyone to glance at. When I asked about the passcode, she gave me this breezy little answer. "There's been a lot of phishing stuff going around at work. IT made us all lock our phones." Fine, reasonable, except Olivia works in patient scheduling at a dermatology practice. I'm not sure their IT department issues phone security mandates to the front desk. I didn't push it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd find out later just how wrong paranoid was as a word for what I was feeling. By the second week of September, she started taking calls outside. Not outside the room. Outside the house. Porch calls. Garage calls. Calls where she'd walk to the far end of the driveway. Like she was worried about line of sight through the windows. When she came back in, I'd ask, casual as I could manage, "Who was that?" Sandra from work. Scheduling drama. Or my sister just venting about Michael again. Both plausible. Both said a little too fast. Here's the thing about marriage. You build a kind of radar for your spouse's voice. The pitch when they're telling the truth. The pitch when they're performing the truth. Olivia's voice on those calls had shifted into performance mode. And I didn't have a name for what I was hearing yet. I just knew the music was off. 3 weeks in, on a Thursday evening. I came home a little early from a site visit at our Hendersonville branch. Olivia was at the kitchen table, laptop open, papers spread out, and the second the door opened, she slammed the laptop shut so hard I heard the hinge complain. "Whoa." I held up both hands. "You good?" "You scared me." She was already gathering the papers into a stack, turning them face down. "I wasn't expecting you yet. Working on something. Just some budget stuff." "Boring." I caught one word on the corner of a page before she swept it away. "Settlement." I told myself it could mean 100 things. Insurance settlement. Work dispute. I told myself a lot of things that week. None of them were true. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there next to a woman I'd built an entire life with, listening to her breathe, wondering what was happening underneath the surface of her that I couldn't see anymore. The following Wednesday, she told me she was meeting a friend for coffee after work, a woman named Patty from her book club. Normal plan, nothing strange about it on its own. I happened to have a delivery to check on at a hardware store 2 blocks from the coffee shop on Lexington Avenue downtown. So, I figured I'd swing by after and surprise her. Maybe walk her to the car. Small, dumb husband thing to do. She wasn't inside. She was on the sidewalk out front, pacing a tight 10-foot loop. Phone pressed to her ear so hard her knuckles were white. I sat in my truck across the street because something about her posture told me not to walk up. Her shoulders were up by her ears. She kept stopping mid-step like she was being interrupted. I couldn't hear much. The street was loud. Somebody's bus pulling away. But I caught fragments. Almost ready. I just need a few more weeks. I know. I'm not backing out. Once it's done, we can finally start over. I promise. Start over. Not figure things out. Not fix this. Start over like the life we'd built was already a closed chapter to her, and she was reading the first page of a new book with somebody else holding the other half. I drove home before she saw me. I don't know what I would have done if she had. That night. I asked how coffee with Patty went. She gave me a whole story. Patty's boyfriend problems. Patty wanting to move to Greenville. Patty this. Patty that. Fluent. Detailed. Rehearsed. I let her finish. Then, as lightly as I could manage, I brought it up myself. You know, we've never really talked about what happens to all our accounts and paperwork if something happened to one of us. Maybe we should get organized. I watched her face. For just a second. Less than a second. Something flickered behind her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by a look of pleasant surprise. Funny you say that. Her surprise looked almost too pleasant to be real. I was actually thinking the same thing. We really should have everything in one place. You know, account numbers, passwords, all of it. Just in case. In case of what? Olivia. I didn't ask out loud. Yeah, that's smart, was all I managed. And I went back to loading the dishwasher with my heart going like a kick drum. Welcome back to sweet family revenge. Grab your snacks. Get comfortable. And remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. Over the next few days, she brought up getting organized 3 more times. Each time, slightly more specific. Did I know our joint account login? Did I have the deed paperwork? Did I know where the title to her car was kept? A woman who had never once in 9 years asked about the location of a single document was suddenly building a checklist. I want to be fair to myself here. I know how this sounds. I know my wife wants to organize our finances doesn't sound like a 5-alarm fire to most people listening. If she'd brought it up once, I'd have shrugged it off completely. It was the combination, the secrecy, the calls, the word settlement on a page she didn't want me to see, the phrase start over outside a coffee shop she swore was just a friend date. Each piece on its own was nothing. Stacked together, they were a shape I recognized, even if I didn't want to. So, on a Tuesday morning after she left for work, I sat down at our kitchen table with my laptop and logged into our joint checking account. 9 years of marriage, and I genuinely never had a reason to scrutinize it line by line. I did that morning. What I found wasn't dramatic. That's what made it worse. It was careful. Over the previous 5 weeks, 4 withdrawals, $400, $600, $350, $500. Each one just under the threshold that would trigger our bank's automatic large transaction alert. None of them matched a bill, a subscription, a grocery run. Anything I recognized. They'd been moved to an account I didn't recognize either. Something with a generic Premier Savings label I'd never set up. I sat there a long time staring at the screen, feeling something settle in my chest, like a stone dropping into still water. I didn't confront her yet. I wasn't ready. And I had a feeling that whatever was coming, I was going to need to be smarter than angry. That afternoon, I called an old friend from NC State, George Daniels, who'd gone on to become a family law attorney in Charlotte. I told him everything. The phone, the calls, the word on the page, the withdrawals. Dave. George let the line go quiet for a second after I'd finished. I'm not going to tell you your marriage is definitely over, but I will tell you this. If even half of what you're describing is real, you need to protect yourself, quietly, legally, now, not after she files, before. He walked me through it. How to document my separate property. How to move what was legitimately mine. The inheritance from my father. The 401k contributions from before we married. My half of a small rental property I owned before Olivia and I even met. Into accounts that were unambiguously, legally, provably mine, notarized, dated, clean. This isn't about hiding anything illegal, George said. This is about making sure that if she's building a case, she's not building it against assets you have every right to protect. Over the next 2 weeks, quietly, methodically. I did exactly that. Every transfer documented, every signature notarized, every date stamped in a way that would later prove beyond any argument that I had acted before she ever filed a single piece of paperwork. I thought that was the end of what I needed to do. I had no idea I was about to take it one step further, and that the next move I made would be the one that actually broke her. Because here's what I hadn't told George yet. Here's what I hadn't told anyone. I wasn't just going to protect what was mine. I was going to find out exactly what she thought she was entitled to by giving her something to find. Here's something I learned about Olivia over 12 years that I hadn't fully clocked until that fall. She has never, not once, been able to resist a number that looks bigger than she expected. Birthday gifts, work bonuses, even the time her aunt left her a modest inheritance. Olivia's first instinct was never gratitude. It was recalculation. What does this change? What's possible now? I used to think it was just practicality. That October, I started wondering if it was something closer to hunger. So, I built her a number to recalculate around. It's week 6 since this all started. Mid-October now. And I want to walk you through exactly what I did, because I think it's the smartest thing I've ever done in my life. And I want you to understand why it worked. I opened a new brokerage account. A real one. Legitimate. In my name only. And I funded it with a modest, unremarkable amount. A few $1,000s. Nothing that would raise eyebrows. Then, using the kind of mocked-up statement template any financial advisor's office hands out for projections, I created a single printed page. Not fraudulent. I want to be clear about that. Because it matters. It was clearly labeled in small print at the bottom as a projected growth estimate. The kind of paper every investment firm generates by the thousands. Out of context. Glanced at quickly by someone who wanted to believe it. It looked like a current account balance. A balance with 6 figures on it. Triple what Olivia thought our combined net worth was. I left it in my desk drawer in the home office. Not hidden, not flaunted. Just there, under a stack of old insurance paperwork. In the kind of spot a person digs through when they're looking for something else and can't help themselves from looking a little further. I want to be honest with you. I felt sick doing it. This isn't who I thought I was, setting traps in my own house. But I kept thinking about that word on the page. Settlement. I kept hearing her voice outside that coffee shop. Start over. If she was already planning her exit, I needed to know what she thought she was walking away with. I didn't have to wait long. 4 days later, I came home to find the home office door slightly ajar. I always close it. Force of habit from years of working from home occasionally. The insurance folder was back in its place, but not quite squared the way I leave it. The statement was tucked back under the folder, but at a slightly different angle than I'd left it. Somebody had been looking. And over the next several days, Olivia changed, not in a way most people would notice, but I'd spent 12 years learning her, and I noticed everything. The secrecy didn't increase, it relaxed. The phone calls got shorter, more confident, less of that pacing white-knuckle energy from the coffee shop. She started humming again, actually humming, while she made dinner. The first time in 2 months. She suggested we go look at a furniture store downtown just for fun, something we hadn't done since our first year of marriage, and stood in front of a dining set that cost more than our current living room furniture, running her hand along the wood like she was already picturing it somewhere. She thought she'd found the real number. She had no idea she'd found exactly what I wanted her to find. The following week, the let's get organized conversation stopped entirely. She didn't need them anymore. She thought she already knew where everything was. Instead, she got quiet in a different way. Purposeful. The kind of quiet that comes right before someone makes a move they've been planning for a while. By the first week of November, I noticed something else. She started coming home late from work events twice in 1 week, dressed a little nicer than a Tuesday at a dermatology office usually called for. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. I had George on speed dial. All my real assets already documented and moved weeks before any of this. And now I had a very good guess about what kind of number she thought she was entitled to half of. On a Friday morning in mid-November, I left for work like any other day. I came home that evening to find a thick envelope on the kitchen table with my name on it, and Olivia sitting across from it with her arms crossed, and an expression I'd never seen on her before, somewhere between rehearsed sympathy and barely contained excitement. "I think you should sit down." Her arms were crossed, that strange new expression fixed on her face. I already knew what it was before I opened it. Divorce papers. Filed that afternoon at the Buncombe County Courthouse. Her requests inside were not modest. Half the house equity. Half of what she believed were joint investment accounts. Listing by name. An account that didn't actually hold what she thought it held. Spousal support, calculated against an income level we had never, not once, actually had. She'd built her entire opening offer around a number I'd manufactured to test her, and she was about to find out the hard way. I want to tell you that I felt rage in that moment. I didn't, not really. I felt something stranger, a kind of cold, settled clarity, like watching a chess piece move exactly where you'd hoped it would. "Okay," I set the papers down gently. "We can talk about this with our lawyers." She looked almost disappointed that I wasn't more rattled. "I'm not trying to hurt you." "Dave, I just need to protect myself. We both knew this wasn't working anymore. This is the part that still gets me." She'd been building an exit for months, moving small amounts of cash, lining up a lawyer, planning a life with someone else. By every indication I'd later confirm. And she stood in our kitchen and called it protecting herself. Like I was the threat in this story. I called George that night. He'd already prepped everything. Every legitimate asset transfer, dated and notarized weeks before her filing. There was something almost like a laugh in his voice when he came back on the line. "Dave, I need you to tell me again about this brokerage account she thinks is 6 figures. I told him everything. That account is real." I kept my voice even. The money in it is real. It's just not what she thinks it is. The number she saw was a projection sheet, not a balance. It was never a balance. I never told her it was a balance. I never said a single word to her about that account. Period. She found it on her own and drew her own conclusion. There was a long pause on the line. "Dave," George finally said, "I've done this job for 15 years. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. Mediation is going to be something else." He had no idea how right he was. The mediation was scheduled for the last week of November. 10 days out. Olivia spent those 10 days like a woman who already knew she'd won. She was warm to me again, almost affectionate, the way people get when they think the hard part is already behind them and they can afford to be generous. She mentioned almost casually that she'd already started looking at apartments, nicer ones than I'd have expected on her salary alone. I wondered more than once who was helping her with that math. I'd find out soon enough, and it wasn't going to be in the mediation room. It was going to come from somewhere, and someone I never expected. The mediation room at her lawyer's office downtown was the kind of space designed to feel neutral, and somehow felt like the opposite. Long table, water pitchers nobody touched, a window looking out over Park Square. Olivia's lawyer was a woman named Nancy Adams. Sharp suit, sharper voice, the kind of attorney who clearly enjoyed opening strong. She did not disappoint. "My client is requesting an equitable division reflecting the marital estate as documented," Nancy Adams said, sliding a folder across the table. "This includes the Montrachet residence, retirement accounts accrued during the marriage, and what we understand to be a joint investment position currently valued in excess of $200,000. George didn't even open the folder. He just looked at me, then back at Nancy Adams, with an expression I can only describe as patient. "I think there's been a significant misunderstanding." George's tone was patient, almost kind. "And I'd like to walk through it carefully because I don't want anyone in this room to be embarrassed by a number that was never real." Olivia's face didn't change yet. She still thought she was sitting on solid ground. George laid it out exactly the way we'd rehearsed it. The brokerage account did exist. Here was the account documentation, opened in October in Dave Bing's name only, funded with a few $1,000s of his own separate premarital savings. Here was the actual current verifiable balance. Here, separately, was the projection sheet, the kind any financial firm generates as a routine illustration of potential 10-year growth under ideal market conditions, clearly labeled as such in the fine print. Never presented to Olivia as a current balance. Never discussed with Olivia at all. "My client made no representation about this account to anyone," George said. "If someone reviewed private paperwork without his knowledge and drew an incorrect conclusion from a clearly labeled projection document, that's not a marital asset misrepresentation. That's an unfortunate misreading." I watched it land on Olivia's face in real time, the color draining out slowly, like watching weather change on a far hillside. "That's not," she started, then stopped. "That account had I saw the number." "You saw a projection," George said gently, almost kindly, which somehow made it worse. "Clearly labeled. I have it right here if you'd like to review the fine print again." Nancy Adams reached over and pulled the page toward herself, scanning it fast, her jaw tightening with every line. She had built her opening position, her client's entire confidence. The apartment Olivia had already started touring around a number that had never existed as a balance in the first place. I'd like to tell you I felt triumphant in that moment. Mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of months of secrecy. Tired of being the one who had to outthink someone I used to trust with everything. Olivia turned to look at me. Not at George. At me. "You did this on purpose," she said. Low enough that I almost didn't catch it. "You left that there for me to find. I didn't deny it. I didn't see the point. I left it there to see what you'd do with it," I said. "I think that tells both of us everything we need to know." Nancy Adams asked for a 15-minute recess. When they came back, the tone in the room had completely shifted. The number $200,000 never came up again. The joint investment line item disappeared from the proposed settlement entirely. What remained on the table was what had always, legally, actually existed. And thanks to George's documentation, thanks to every transfer dated and notarized weeks before she'd filed a single page. The marital estate split came out close to exactly what North Carolina law would have required regardless. No windfall, no bonus round. Olivia left that mediation with what she was always entitled to, nothing more. She did not take it well. The calls started that same night, not angry at first, confused, almost pleading. "Can we talk about this? I don't understand what happened. Can you just explain it to me?" By the second night, the tone had flipped entirely, voicemails alternating between sobbing apologies and furious accusations, sometimes within the same 60-second message. She called me cruel. She called the beta account psychotic. She called me a liar, which I want you to sit with that one for a second, because I certainly did. I didn't respond to any of it. George had told me not to engage, and for once in my life, staying quiet was the easiest advice I'd ever followed. About 3 weeks later, in mid-December, I got a call from a guy named Tony Reyes. Tony and I weren't close. Exactly. We'd golfed a handful of times through a mutual friend group, the kind of guy you're friendly with, but wouldn't call out of the blue. He asked to meet for coffee, said it was important. When I sat down across from him, he slid his phone across the table without much preamble. "I think you need to see this," he said. "I've been going back and forth on whether to show you. I decided you deserve to know." It was a string of text messages between Olivia and a man named Alex, someone I'd never met, never heard of until that exact moment, who turned out to work in commercial real estate and apparently had a mutual friend in Tony's circle who'd gotten uneasy watching things play out from a distance. The messages went back 4 months, since before the phone passcode, since before the porch calls. Olivia and Alex had been planning this exit together for the entire stretch I'd spent slowly putting the pieces together myself. One message, dated the week before mediation, read, "Once the settlement's in, we'll have more than enough for the down payment. I just need him to sign off on the number." Alex's response, "Don't let him talk you down. You've earned this. We start fresh the second it clears. Start fresh." The same words I'd heard outside that coffee shop in September, except now I finally had the full sentence around them. There were messages from the night of the mediation. 2. Olivia, devastated, telling Alex the number had collapsed, that Dave had somehow tricked her. Alex's reply was 4 words long. "He played you. Move on." And just like that, the second the money didn't materialize, he was gone. Not slowly, not with some difficult conversation, just gone. Like he'd never been planning a future with her at all. Only a payout he could ride along on. I thanked Tony. I meant it more than I think he understood. The texts didn't stay private for long. Tony hadn't shown them to anyone else, but the mutual friend who'd originally flagged them to him had less restraint. And within a couple of weeks, the broad strokes of what Olivia had been doing had made their way through our shared circle of friends. The story she'd been telling people that I'd blindsided her, that I'd been secretly hoarding money, fell apart fast once people understood the actual timeline. Her brother Michael, who'd initially texted me something cold about how could you do this to her, called me in late December to apologize. "I didn't know the whole picture," he said. "I'm sorry I took her word for it without asking yours." The divorce was finalized the 3rd week of December, just under 4 months after I'd first noticed her white-knuckling her phone on a Sunday evening in August. I kept the house in Montford. I kept what was legitimately mine, fully documented, fully legal, untouched by any of it. Olivia kept her car, her personal belongings, and a settlement that reflected reality instead of a fantasy number she'd built an entire future around. I won't pretend there isn't a strange kind of grief in all this. 12 years doesn't disappear just because the ending turned out to be ugly. I still think about the version of her I married, the one who used to leave her phone face up on the coffee table because she had nothing to hide from me. I don't know exactly when that version of her stopped existing. Maybe she never really did, and I just hadn't been paying close enough attention. My mother, Carol, drove up from Greenville the first weekend of January with paint swatches and absolutely zero patience for my moping. We repainted the home office that used to hold a folder I'll never forget. She made me get rid of the desk entirely, said it had bad energy now, which is not something I expected my mother to say to me at 44 years old. But she wasn't wrong. The house feels like mine again. Quiet in a good way now. Not the suspicious kind of quiet I lived inside for 4 months without realizing it. People sometimes ask me if I feel guilty about the bait account. I've thought about that question a lot. And here's where I've landed. I never told Olivia a single lie. I never altered a real number. I never claimed that document was something it wasn't. I left a piece of paper in a drawer, and she chose on her own, without anyone forcing her hand, to go looking through my private things, draw her own conclusion, and build an entire legal strategy, and apparently an entire next relationship around a number she never verified, and I never confirmed. She wasn't betrayed by a trap. She was undone by her own certainty that she already knew everything. I think about that coffee shop sometimes, the way she paced outside, phone pressed to her ear, promising someone they'd start fresh soon. They did start fresh. Eventually. Just not with each other. And not with the money either of them was counting on. As for me, I'm not in a hurry to start anything with anyone. For now. I'm just enjoying a house that's quiet because it's peaceful. Not because someone in it is hiding something. That's a kind of fresh start. 2. It just took the long way getting here. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this. Every now and then, I'll drive past that same coffee shop without meaning to. The patio tables are usually full of people talking about work, making weekend plans, or simply enjoying the afternoon sun. To everyone else, it's just another neighborhood cafe. To me, it quietly marks the place where one chapter of my life finally ended, even though I didn't realize it at the time. Funny how certain places become landmarks in our personal histories, while the rest of the world walks by without a second glance. Looking back now, I don't wonder whether things could have turned out differently. That question kept me awake for far too many nights after everything happened. Eventually, I realized it was the wrong question altogether. The better question was, would I want to go back to being the person I was before I learned the truth? The answer has always been no. That version of me trusted too easily, ignored too many warning signs, and believed that keeping the peace was more important than protecting it. Losing that version of myself felt painful at first. Now it feels like growth. There is a quiet confidence that comes from no longer needing every answer or every apology. Some people spend years waiting for the person who hurt them to finally explain why. I used to think I needed that conversation before I could move on. I don't anymore. Closure isn't something another person hands you. It's something you gradually build for yourself through acceptance. Healthy boundaries, and the decision to stop measuring your future by someone else's choices. These days, the house has its own rhythm. Saturday mornings begin with coffee on the back patio, a newspaper I rarely finish, and sunlight filtering through the trees. I leave dishes in the sink sometimes because there's no one to disappoint but myself. I play music while I cook dinner, And if I decide breakfast belongs at 7 in the evening, no one argues with me. Those small freedoms sound almost trivial until you've spent years walking carefully around secrets you couldn't quite name. Peace isn't loud. It's found in ordinary moments that no longer require vigilance. Friends occasionally ask whether I'll ever start dating again. I usually smile and tell them maybe someday. I'm not opposed to love. I simply no longer confuse being alone with being lonely. There's an enormous difference between an empty house and a peaceful one. One echoes because something is missing. The other is quiet because nothing needs to be hidden anymore. That distinction took me a long time to understand. But once I did, solitude stopped feeling like a punishment and started feeling like a gift. If the right person enters my life someday, I hope they'll appreciate the quiet as much as I do. Not because silence is the goal, but because honesty makes silence comfortable. The best relationships aren't built on constant excitement. They're built on the ability to sit across from someone in complete peace, knowing neither of you has anything to conceal. Looking back, I don't wish the difficult years had never happened. They taught me to recognize the difference between appearances and authenticity, between promises and patterns, between a comfortable illusion and a truthful life. Those lessons came at a price I never wanted to pay, but they continue paying dividends every single day. If this story leaves you with anything, I hope it's this: never mistake starting over for starting from nothing. Every experience, even the painful ones, gives you something worth carrying forward. Better judgment, stronger boundaries, deeper gratitude, a clearer understanding of the life you truly want to build. Those things become the foundation of every fresh start that follows. And perhaps that's why I still think about that little coffee shop now and then. Not because I miss what happened there, but because it reminds me how impossible it is to recognize certain turning points while you're living through them. Sometimes, what feels like the worst afternoon of your life quietly becomes the first page of the best chapter still waiting to be written. Today, the house is peaceful. My heart is lighter. The future no longer feels like something to fear or chase. It simply feels open. And after taking the long road to get here, I've discovered that some fresh starts aren't defined by finding someone new. They're defined by finally becoming someone who feels completely at home in their own life.